Good morning, everybody. My name's Peter Molyneux. I'm the Roads Director of Transport for the North, and we've been working with partners to develop a major route network for the North, which means that we can actually target investments which will bring about better value for money and economic growth.
Morning, everyone. I'm Nigel Foster. I'm the Strategy Director at Transport for the North. One of the main areas of activity that we are undertaking at the moment is about Northern Powerhouse Rail. That's developing those proposals for Northern Powerhouse Rail to make sure we can deliver those fast, more frequent services connecting the main economic centres of the North, as David has already said. As part of that, we are prioritising our activities at the moment to try and integrate that with the plans for High Speed 2 and to make sure that we can incorporate and integrate our plans within the hybrid bill for HS2 Phase 2B. That's a real priority. We're also working with Rail North, Network Rail, and many of our partners in the room here about the plans for the rail network as a whole in the north of England and make sure that we've got the network capacity and opportunity for new services right through to the end of this century.
Morning all, I'm John Spruce. I'm the Interim Head of Policy and Strategy at TFN, and I've been leading the team, both internal TFN and external in a lot of your organisations, that's been developing the evidence base that's been published this week and is on the little card in your pack, and taking that forward to the transport plan which will be published in the autumn.
Good morning, I'm Alastair Richards. I'm the Smart and Integrated Travel Programme Director at Transport for the North, working with partners in the room to build a more connected, smarter North. We're working in collaboration with our partners at Northern, Transpennine, Merseyrail to make better, smart travel across the North and get better information from the rail travel. We're also working on our Tranche 2 in improving the information available to customers before they make their travel choices. And our big element is Tranche 3, which is about delivering a pay-as-you-go proposition for contactless bank cards.
So, Neil, if we go to you first.
Hi, I'm Neil Anderson from AME. I guess the question I'd most ask that's on my mind is, given the inevitable focus on the large-scale projects, how do we make sure that the last mile works so that your 17-year-old apprentice can actually participate in and contribute to this economic transformation?
Yeah. Really good point. That's why we've got so many partners in the room. We're working really closely with local authorities, combined authorities, transport authorities across the north of England to make sure that we have an integrated solution for transport. So whilst we might be looking at the pan-northern strategic interventions that are really important, we're actually working with our partners, as Jonathan said, to make sure that actually it's part of an integrated plan, to make sure we work, as Steve Gooding said and John Cridland said, with land use and economic proposals that the authorities are bringing forward, but to make sure we get door to door. One of the key parts of what Alastair was talking about in terms of smart is the information to make the choices much easier, to make the ticketing much easier, and to make sure that your journey is much easier. And that's the sort of thing we're doing. So last mile is important to us, but it's not the area that we focus on because we've got our partners in the room who are already doing it.
Hello, my name's Mary-Claude Hemming. I'm Director of External Affairs at CECA, Civil Engineering Contractors Association. Just a quick question, which we may know the answer in about an hour's time. In light of the political events, do you have any view on the funding levels and government support for your fantastic projects in Transport for the North? Do you anticipate there'll be change, and how will you work with the challenges?
I think what you'll see today, I think you'll see in the Queen's speech a commitment to infrastructure and transport infrastructure, so High Speed 2 will be in there, I'm sure. But I think there's a cross-party understanding that you need to invest in infrastructure, and transport infrastructure is part of that overall mix. At the moment, we have funding to set up the organisation, which we are using. Alastair has up to £150 million available for developing the smart system. We've got about £130 million available to us for developing Northern Powerhouse Rail and some of the road studies that we're looking at. So that's quite a good start. I think we believe that getting clearer priorities will enable us to influence existing funding streams, so Network Rail and Highways England, so that they're spending the money on the things we think they should be spending them on in the north of England. And then secondly, our big ticket items, so on strategic new highway connectivity or Northern Powerhouse Rail, we need to make the case for those because they're multi-billion pound schemes and get them into the national programme. And prior to the election, Northern Powerhouse Rail was in all three of the main party manifestos. So that we think there is a commitment. But I have to tell you, these things take a long time. So we need to be planning and making the case for that, alongside the delivery of High Speed 2, alongside greater spend in total on infrastructure, and then complementing the work that our local transport authority colleagues are doing. So again, my plea would be, don't get drawn into a conversation which is which would you want, that one or that one? We actually want them both. And don't get drawn into what's your top priority. They are both trick questions. The top priority is a considered 30-year investment programme in transport across the north of England.
Thank you, David, for your comments. Sorry, I'm Tim Hawkins. I'm from the Manchester Airports Group. Should introduce myself. Thank you for your comments about the importance of international connectivity. I was just reflecting on actually the very strong role that Transport for London took in helping shape the government's aviation policy for the South East. I just wondered whether you could comment on the role that you see for TFN in helping shape the government's aviation policy for the North and for the wider the UK.
Okay, I mean, I can do that, and then I'll pass it over to Jonathan, can pick up how we're picking that up in the plan. John Cridland did the international connectivity work, and again, just turned it around and said, let's get some significant business leaders from the north of England who trade globally to give us their views about where are the places that we need to be better connected to. And we're now taking that forward as part of the plan, which Jonathan can pick up. But I think there is a role for Transport for the North in helping input a northern perspective into any evolving aviation policy for central government, and making sure that the value that international connectivity is really captured in all the economic analysis that he's done. So again, I've been in Newcastle this week at Newcastle Airport. We had conversations with all of the airports, I think, in the last few months. And capturing the value of improved international connectivity through better use of the northern airports while the ongoing conversation around Heathrow continues, I think will be absolutely important. And one of the recommendations that John's team came up with was how can we act as Team North on these issues and actually get a clear perspective on behalf of the North into aviation policy. Jonathan.
Yes, thanks, David. So I think I just echo David's comments. I just had two things, Tim. I think so when John Cridland launched the International Connectivity Report in February, he was very clear that international connectivity starts on the ground, that access to the airport. So back to the last mile question that started this. So all of us can improve the North's access to our airports and access for international visitors from our airports to the North's economic assets. And that's a key role that we can play. And I think building on that, Tim, is this ability, is again, the opportunity of the North. So the North is ready. It has the capacity in its airports. It has the opportunity in those economic assets in those dots. And we need to make that case collectively that the government cannot ignore that opportunity. So while it does prevaricate about southeastern capacity, the North has that capacity and opportunity, and we need to grasp that. And that is a key, I think we are trying to do to the plan, and we can move that forward to the aviation strategy.
Malcolm Bingham, I'm Head of Policy for the Freight Transport Association in North of England. It almost follows on to the airport issue, and I want to switch to seaports. One of the biggest problems that we've had on international trade is persuading the shipping lines to actually use the facilities that we've got, on both sides of the country. What can Transport for the North do to try and influence that?
So I think, again, Malcolm, this is about that crucial thing that David said about east-west connectivity and time, because time is crucial to your industry and to the ports. So the fact that as David said, you know, sort of anything that's been brought into the port of Hull that is trying to get to sort of like Lancashire or to South or to Cumbria has to then travel down and across the M62 and then back up the M6 is ludicrous. It needs to go sort of as the fastest route possible. Drax Power Station importing biomass through Port of Liverpool is a huge opportunity for the whole of the North, but they need paths and availability to move that biomass across the Pennines to Drax Power Station from the Port of Liverpool. And it's that, at the moment we have one rung of the ladder, we say, which is essentially the M62 or the Trans-Pennine Rail route. And when that rung fails, it's not resilient. We need to offer that resilience, we need to offer choice. So for us, that east-west connectivity is important because that allows our ports then to offer that reliability and resilience and time to the shippers, which actually says, bring it into the Port of Liverpool, bring it into the Humber ports, bring it into the Port of Tyne, bring it into the Port of Tees, and we will be able to deliver you the 16 million people market in a timely and resilient fashion. And at the moment we can't offer that, and that's why they don't come.
And I think the other thing is, when we're trying to make the case for investment for freight, we need to turn it around and turn it into an opportunity, and that's what the work that Lucy did on the freight report is starting to say, here's the size of the opportunity if we can improve that connectivity. Clearly the market's not there now because people can't make those movements, so it's actually turning it around and using the freight industry as that voice to say, here's what we could do if we had this improvements in connectivity.
John Dowie, First Bus. I was just reflecting on the earlier exchange about the last mile, and clearly it has to be right that TFN is looking at the strategic pan-northern position, city regions, local authorities looking at the local. But I'm concerned that you're missing the signalling, messaging opportunity to stress the importance of local transport, bus transport, which is 2/3 of the public transport market, at scale is fundamental to the economy and society of the North. And what you say about large-scale adoption of bus priority, freeing up the highway, the signals you send about, say, tram or large local projects versus lots of micro packaging interventions, that matters, that will affect opinion. So I think I would encourage you to reflect on the signals you send as you come to finalise the strategy.
So I think you make a good point, John, but I'm going to emphasise that we're set up deliberately to look at the deficiencies in the pan-northern transport networks. That doesn't mean we're not interested in what happens in cities, because, for example, if we want more people on Northern Powerhouse Rail or on High Speed 2, then we really need to be able to get them to those hubs where those services are going to stop. And that means public transport at a local level, at a combined authority level, at a city region level. So we really do need to work. Peter and I are working on some of the roads projects across the north. Some of those are going to go through our combined authority areas. They're going to have local interventions in there. They might have park and ride for bus. They might have bus priority. So we have to make sure that we can accommodate those long distance movements with what the needs are within the combined authority. And we're working really closely through the Strategic Transport Plan Development Group with our colleagues in the combined authorities to make sure we have an integrated plan. That doesn't happen very often. I think we heard Steve Gooding say we need to do things differently. We need to work in partnership. We need to take these long-term views around investment. David made it really clear. We're not trying to say what's affordable in the next 5 years. We're saying what does the North need to unlock its economic assets and create opportunities for people and businesses across the North. So we're trying to take that long-term view, but you're absolutely right, whether it's last mile question or whether it's about what local transport needs are, they've got to work together and it's got to be part of a set of integrated plans.
Alastair, do you want to?
Yeah, I think in smart ticketing and information, we recognise that we're supporting and we're working with operators to help them deliver their service to customers. We're not delivering to customers directly, so it's really important to us that we work collaboratively, and which we are doing, and get operators' needs, but also understand what the customer wants. And we think through that, making it easier for customers, together we can achieve that return to growth in particularly the bus, that local transport market. By making it easier, making it more accessible to people, we will get them out of their cars.
Hi, Julie Hurley from Atkins. I think David just said that the plan wasn't for transport planners, and we've talked a lot before about businesses being engaged with the plan. I just wondered what Transport for the North's plans were to engage the public. on this, because it's a long-term plan, and they can help hopefully exert some pressure on politicians. So I just wondered what your thoughts and plans were following the publication of this STP.
Okay. Jonathan, do you want to...
Thanks, David. Yes. So this week, Julie, as David kind of alluded to, is a slightly not traditional way of doing stuff, because by launching the evidence and by putting it out on our website, we're kind of saying to everybody, does this feel right? We're going to do, starting from today, there's about a month's worth of engagement events all across the north of England. Many of you have been invited to some of these more locally, where we're having drop-in sessions where people can come and they can test us on the evidence base. And for us, that's really important, because what we have learned is that, as you said, it's not a transport planner's plan. It's about the plan for the north, as John said. It's about the opportunities, the entrepreneur's plan. And we need to make sure that the evidence that helps us build the plan is right. We'll take all that away, and then we'll develop the plan itself, and then the plan will be subject to formal public consultation in the winter. But I will probably say to you all now that I don't think we'll have done our job properly if, when that plan arrives, people say, I don't recognise that, or I don't see that, or that doesn't feel right. We want to make sure it feels right. We think it does. We think some of the work we've done so far has created that buzz. We think the areas we've identified where we need to join the dots are the real economic opportunities. But the next month or so, starting from today, will tell us whether it is or not. So I think we're doing it in a very open way. I think we're doing it in a way that tries to match this isn't transport planners. This isn't just a bunch of us in a room drawing lines on plans. This is, does it feel right? Does it make a difference to people's lives?
Penny Marshall from the Institution of Civil Engineers in the North East and Yorkshire. I endorse wholeheartedly the idea that you have to focus on key corridors and key centres of population. But when we look at the map, there's an awful lot of the north that doesn't have a dot. And yet that still is our places of economic opportunity. If we look at Redcar, Hartlepool, Bradford, West Cumbria, there's an awful lot of potential for economic growth there. And I'd just like to know what you're going to do for those places that are outside joining the dots.
Okay, I'll get Nigel to answer that, but that might be my loose language. So it's not just about big cities, so the actual dots tend to be about economic assets. So there's a huge amount of economic activity around the coasts that aren't big population centres that we need to connect up. So I apologise if that's my language, but Nigel can give you a more eloquent explanation of the dots.
This isn't a politician's answer, Penny. Nowhere's outside the boundaries of the north for us. I think John Cridland, David, are all saying, I think people in this room, it's about the economy, and it's not about transport. If you think about where we started our planning process, we started with a Northern Powerhouse independent economic review. That says it all. It's what are the economic assets, what is the economic opportunity, what is the economic need. So we're actually trying to make sure we do that. That's why we're engaging here today with you, because you are largely transport professionals. But then we're going out and engaging, as David said, we've been engaging with chambers of commerce, we've been engaging with the institutions, as you know, we've been engaging with businesses quite widely. We need to make sure this plan is meaningful to those people. We've all got friends and family, everybody in this room, that have nothing to do with transport, but they use it every day to get to their work, to get to their businesses, to get to their whatever they want to do as in their personal lives. And so we've got to try and do our bit to make it better. That's why it's a long-term plan. That's why it's about joining things up. So you mentioned a couple of places. Our first 3 studies that we're in the process of letting now, big corridor studies to make sure we capture broad area and broad interchange, passenger and freight, road and rail. We're actually connecting the energy coasts. That's Cumbria across the northeast, including Redcar, and the assets around Teesside and Tyneside. We're also looking at the Central Pennines corridor study, which Peter's leading on, and that's actually connecting across from Lancashire and the Atlantic Gateway across to Hull, including Bradford, and what the opportunities are for there. We're also looking at Bradford as part of our Northern Powerhouse Rail. So I would really say to everybody in the room, nothing's out of scope within the north of England, but what we're focusing our attention on is what those pan-northern priorities should be.
Yeah, good morning. Rich Marshall, Highways England. I've actually got two questions, if that's all right. But one is, we welcome, obviously, the information around the capacity of the networks. The question in there is around TFN working to enhance the capacity and capability of the sector, and the skills growth that we need to deliver all this wonderful and exciting stuff. And then linked to that, making the case for investment, is that also inclusive of what's left once the investment's been made, so the ongoing operation and maintenance of all these extra bits that support that growth. Thank you.
So I think that's really important, because one of the reasons that we want to we're working so closely with Highways England and Department for Transport in the development of the major route network is that it will enable us to spend that money more wisely. So it will provide greater resilience by providing investment on roads that may be not part of the strategic route network, but actually may benefit the strategic route network. But I think the big benefit is that actually, as we grow the economy, there will be more revenue generated that can then be put forward into maintenance levels. And I think as we make better use of the existing assets as well as building additional infrastructure, we then provide even greater growth, and growth will become even greater growth. And I think that's the real positive message that we can get from this.
And on skills, absolutely. I should have mentioned it earlier. We've commissioned a piece of work that Dawn's leading for us in TFN, which is looking at the transport sector in the north of England and what is the current expectation of skills gaps and opportunities for the north. So again, don't want to make this massive, but it's the north and the transport sector all the way through from scheme development to delivery, working with your organisation, local authorities. Is there an opportunity there for us, if we can get a long-term programme, to have an ecosystem of skills development using our institutions in the north?
Hi, Gemma Lennon. I work with a group of companies. The company that's in Scunthorpe, one of our organisations is a company that gets involved with port infrastructure, construction and civil engineering. One company gets involved with Network Rail and smaller projects, and the other one gets involved with smaller road projects. What I'm interested to know as an organisation that gets involved with the smaller end of projects, and those three companies being SME companies, how do we become involved and how do we be heard and be part of this happening?
Yeah, so I think there's two answers to that. One is things like this. Please don't feel free to make contact with us, and we're happy then to come and talk and explain what our plans are. The second thing is that we are really keen that the business community act as a voice on behalf of us and also inform the plan. There's a lot of business groups across the north of England, and so one of the things I would encourage business colleagues in the room is starting to come together to give us a consolidated view, because trying to distill all of those groups is quite difficult. But as Nigel has said, we've already done quite a huge amount of engagement, and more than happy to build on the work that we've already done in the Humber with organisations like yourself.
Richard Allen from Northern. Really interesting first hour. I was struck by the phrase, and not that we need a reminder, but decision makers are based in London, which I think sums up our challenge in a nutshell. Interested in your analysis of who the key decision makers are, and what would you like the people in this room to say when they meet those key decision makers to help Transport for the North succeed?
I think there are two. So nominally it's the Department for Transport, so it's making the case to the Department for Transport that we've got a clearly well thought through plan that's got an economic underpinning and it's got a business case. There's no point going with a wish list of schemes that haven't got an economic underpinning and a business case. And then secondly, there are people in Treasury and other government departments, because this is not a transport project. It's an economic project. So business leaders speaking to key decision makers in Treasury or BEIS, actually saying we need this transport investment to grow our businesses, is equally as important as going to the sponsoring department, the Department for Transport, because that's where I think the influence will be. And the answer should be a consistent delivery of funding to enable us to deliver the transport priorities for the north of England. And hopefully we'll be able to give the evidence for that to make that case.
Good morning everyone. John Sanford here from the Homes and Communities Agency, which incidentally is planned to be rebranded as Homes England over the course of the summer. I'm the infrastructure lead for the agency. And just to get housing on today's agenda, my question is, there are a multitude of large housing sites across the country, a multitude of large housing sites across the north. Some of the garden suburbs and villages are planned for the north as well. So my question is, what does the strategy need to be to focus transport investment on those housing areas and on helping to deliver housing, which is a major government policy, cross-party policy?
Very good question. I think what I said earlier is that we're working really closely with partners. Our partners are the ones who hold the economic planning and the spatial planning, and we're working with those to make sure we can help them and integrate our plans to help them unlock their big development areas. And Peter and I have done a number of that, so we've been doing some work with Crewe as part of Constellation, or what was formerly Crewe Northern Gateway, a Crewe hub. And also we were supportive of Kirklees in some of its plans for a major housing development in Kirklees with a new road connecting the M62 and the M1. So that's not something we're going to drive on our own, but we are going to work with our partners to make sure we do our bit to get their plans realised. And I think that's the way we should be working.
Okay. Hi, Paul Hirsch from Alastair Goddard. Just picking up the point about Treasury, and it's a big theme. To what extent, or what are you sensing their view is of the level of contribution needed from those who will benefit from the schemes going forward as part of that funding mix, and how will we deliver that?
Yeah. One of the questions we get asked all the time is what contribution would the North make to this infrastructure? The technical answer is we're doing some work on where we might finance and fund that from. I think at a very simple level, there is no shortage of money, and people want to invest in infrastructure. The difficult bit is how do they get the return, how do they get the money back, and how do you service the debt? And I think it's too simplistic to say if the North wants this, it should fund it, because actually we're doing this to drive the northern economy, to increase the tax that people pay to grow the UK's economy. And I think it's a bit of, my personal opinion, is it's a bit of a cul-de-sac to say, if you want it, you pay for it, because we're about driving the UK's economy and getting that underperforming economy to uplift and grow more. And therefore, we're arguing that it's a national spend, and it's a spend that actually needs to be done through central government, but clearly the more we interface with things like housing and other developments, that we can see whether there's opportunities for local funding. But I think we need to avoid the whole conversation about if you want it, then you pay for it, because this is part of driving UK economic growth through the North.